Single mom mistakes billionaire's penthouse for Airbnb, walks in on him in towel and unpacks. Hello, viewer. Thanks for joining us. Leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments, along with the city you're watching from. Now let's continue with the story. The code worked. That was all Sarah Miller needed to know as she juggled her sleeping 6-year-old son, 2 overstuffed duffel bags, and what felt like the weight of an entire year's worth of hope pressing against her chest. She didn't question why the penthouse door clicked open so smoothly, or why the apartment looked even more breathtaking than the online photos had promised. She simply stepped inside, let out a breath she'd been holding since her double shift ended 3 hours ago, and carefully lowered Noah onto the pristine white sofa that probably cost more than her yearly rent. This was it. The dream weekend she'd promised him for his 6th birthday. 52 weeks of setting aside every spare dollar, of skipping lunches and walking instead of taking the subway, of lying awake at night calculating and recalculating until the numbers finally, miraculously, added up. 1 luxury vacation rental in Manhattan. 3 days of showing her son a life beyond their cramped Brooklyn apartment, beyond the diner where she served coffee to people who never looked her in the eye, beyond the office building she cleaned while those same people slept. Sarah moved through the apartment in a daze of exhausted wonder, running her fingertips along the cool marble countertops in the kitchen, marveling at the floor-to-ceiling windows that framed the glittering city like a painting she could never afford to own. The refrigerator hummed softly, stocked with ingredients she couldn't pronounce. The stove gleamed, untouched. Everything about this place whispered money and power, and a kind of life that existed only in movies and dreams. She set her bags down and began unpacking their modest supplies onto that magnificent kitchen island. A box of generic cereal, store-brand milk, peanut butter sandwiches wrapped in plastic wrap. The contrast was almost funny. Almost. But Noah would wake up tomorrow morning in this beautiful place, and for 3 precious days he'd feel like a prince instead of the kid whose sneakers were held together with duct tape. Sarah found herself humming as she organized their things, a habit from her grandmother that surfaced whenever she felt close to happy. The tune was old, something about home and grace, and it filled the cavernous apartment with warmth it clearly wasn't used to containing. 38 floors above her, in that same apartment she believed she'd rented, Ethan Caldwell stood under a shower hot enough to scald, trying to wash away another 16-hour workday that had accomplished nothing except confirming what he already knew. He was successful, he was powerful, he was utterly, completely alone. The water beat against his shoulders, and he let his mind drift to the quarterly reports, the merger negotiations, the hostile takeover attempts, the endless parade of numbers and strategies that had consumed his life for the past 6 years. Ever since Vanessa, ever since he'd learned the hard way that trust was a luxury billionaires couldn't afford, that vulnerability was just another word for target. That the fortress he'd built around himself was the only thing standing between him and complete destruction. He'd moved into this penthouse 2 months ago, the latest and greatest in his collection of beautiful, empty spaces. State-of-the-art security, biometric locks, surveillance cameras, motion sensors. Everything designed to keep the world out and him safely locked inside his comfortable cage. Ethan turned off the water and reached for a towel, wrapping it around his waist. Steam followed him as he opened the bathroom door, already mentally composing the email he'd sent to his head of security about updating the... He froze. There was singing coming from his kitchen, a woman's voice, soft and slightly off-key, humming something that sounded like a hymn. For one wild second, Ethan wondered if he'd finally cracked, if the isolation had driven him to auditory hallucinations. But then he heard something else, the rustle of plastic bags, the soft thud of items being set on his counter. Someone was in his apartment, someone was unpacking groceries in his kitchen, someone had breached every layer of his security and was now humming. His heart hammered as he moved silently toward the kitchen, water still dripping from his hair, the towel his only armor. He should call security. He should hit the panic button installed by his bedroom door. He should do anything except what he was doing, which was walking barefoot across cold marble toward the intruder who'd somehow made it past $6 million worth of security systems to organize cereal boxes. Sarah was reaching for the top shelf of a cabinet when she felt it, that prickling awareness of not being alone. She turned, and the scream that tore from her throat could have shattered the floor-to-ceiling windows. A man stood in the doorway, a very tall, very wet, very nearly naked man with water sliding down his chest and shock written across a face that belonged on magazine covers, not in midnight kitchens. His dark hair was plastered to his head. His grey eyes were wide, with what looked like equal parts confusion and alarm. And he was clutching a towel around his waist like it was the only thing between him and complete exposure. Which, technically, it was. The box of cereal tumbled from Sarah's hands, hitting the floor and exploding in a shower of off-brand cornflakes. "Who are you?" she managed, her voice somewhere between a shriek and a whisper. "What are you doing here? What am I?" The man's voice was deep and rough, shock giving way to something harder. "This is my apartment. Who are you? How did you get in here?" "Your apartment?" Sarah's mind struggled to process this. No, I rented this place. I have the confirmation email. I have the code. The code worked." Code. His eyes narrowed, and Sarah watched his posture shift from shocked to suspicious, water still gleaming on his shoulders. What code? The entry code from the rental company. She fumbled for her phone, hands shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. "I have proof. I paid for this. I saved for a year for this weekend. My son's birthday. I have every right to be here." "Your son?" The man's gaze shot to the living room where Noah was beginning to stir on the sofa, his small face scrunching in confusion. "You brought a child into a stranger's home. This isn't a stranger's home. This is a vacation rental. I rented it legally." But even as she said it, Sarah's stomach was dropping, reality crashing in with the force of a freight train. The apartment had looked too perfect. The price had seemed too good. The confirmation email had come from an address she'd convinced herself was legitimate because she'd needed it to be legitimate. Oh, God. Oh, no. No, no, no. "You were scammed," the man said, and his voice had lost some of its edge, replaced by something that might have been pity. "This is a rental scam. Someone hacked the building's entry system, sent you fake credentials, took your money. It's sophisticated, and you're not the first victim this month." The words hit Sarah like physical blows. Scammed, victim, the entire year of savings, the promise to Noah, the dream of giving him something special, something beautiful, something that would make up for all the times she couldn't afford the field trip or the birthday party or the new shoes. Gone, stolen, and she'd been stupid enough, desperate enough, to fall for it. "I need to call the police," the man said, reaching for his phone. "No!" Sarah's voice cracked. "Please, don't. I'll leave. I'll just take my son and go. We won't cause any trouble. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for the intrusion. It's midnight, and according to every weather report, we're about to get hit by a historic blizzard." He gestured to the windows, where snow had indeed begun to fall, thick and fast. "Where exactly would you go?" I don't know. Anywhere, just not here. I can't." She couldn't finish. Couldn't explain that the humiliation was crushing her, that standing in this beautiful apartment that would never be hers, looking at this man in his towel who clearly thought she was some kind of criminal or con artist, was more than she could bear. "Please, just let me take my things and leave." Sarah moved toward the living room, toward Noah, but the man's voice stopped her. "Wait!" She turned and found him studying her with an intensity that made her want to disappear. His jaw was tight, his expression unreadable, but something had shifted in those grey eyes. Something that looked almost like understanding, regret. She couldn't tell. "The guest room," he said finally, the words seeming to cost him something. "Down that hall, second door on the right. It has its own bathroom. You and your son can stay there tonight, just tonight. The storm should pass by morning, and then you can make arrangements. I don't need your charity," Sarah said. The words automatic, a defense mechanism built over years of pride being the only thing she had left. "It's not charity," he replied, his voice flat. "It's liability. If you walk out into that storm with a 6-year-old child and something happens, I become legally responsible. Consider it self-preservation, not kindness." The lie was obvious. The kindness underneath it was obvious too. But Sarah was exhausted, and Noah was waking up looking confused and scared, and she didn't have the luxury of pride when her son's safety was at stake. "Just tonight," she agreed quietly, "and then we'll be gone. You'll never see us again." The man nodded, but something flickered across his face, something that looked like disappointment, though that made no sense at all. "I'm Ethan Caldwell," he said. "And you should know that I have excellent security cameras recording everything, so if you're planning anything—" "I'm not planning anything except surviving until morning," Sarah interrupted, anger flashing through the humiliation. "My name is Sarah Miller. That's my son Noah. We're not criminals. We're not con artists. We're just people who got scammed trying to do something nice." "I know," Ethan said, and his voice had gone soft again. "I'm sorry that happened to you. Genuinely." Sarah gathered Noah into her arms, grabbed their bags, and headed for the guest room without another word. But at the doorway, she paused and looked back. Ethan was still standing in the kitchen, water puddles forming at his feet, the towel wrapped around his waist, cereal scattered across his perfect floor. He looked as lost as she felt, as alone as she'd been for the past 5 years. As scared, in his own way, as Noah had been on the nights when Sarah couldn't afford to turn on the heat. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not calling the police, for letting us stay. Thank you." Ethan met her eyes across the vast expanse of his empty apartment. "Lock the door," was all he said. "You'll be safe here." "I promise." And strangest of all, standing in the doorway of a billionaire's guest room, with her scammed vacation in ruins and her pride in tatters, Sarah believed him. Morning arrived with the kind of silence that only heavy snow can bring, muffling the usual chaos of New York City into something soft and otherworldly. Sarah woke disoriented, her body registering the luxury sheets before her mind caught up with where she was and how she'd gotten here. Then the memories crashed in, the code that shouldn't have worked, the man in the towel, the year of savings, gone. She pressed her palm against her mouth, swallowing the sob that wanted to escape. Noah was curled beside her in the enormous bed, his small hand clutching the edge of her shirt, the way he always did when he sensed something was wrong. 6 years old, and he'd already learned to hold on tight to the only parent he had left. Sarah slipped from the bed and moved to the window, pushing back curtains that probably cost more than her monthly rent. The city had vanished beneath a blanket of white. Snow was still falling, thick and relentless, and even from 38 floors up, she could see that the streets below were empty. Abandoned cars sat buried. Nothing was moving. Nothing could move. "We're stuck," she whispered to her reflection in the glass. Stuck in a stranger's home. Stuck accepting charity from a billionaire who'd made it clear he didn't trust her. Stuck in the ruins of the one beautiful thing she'd tried to give her son. "Mommy." Noah's sleepy voice pulled her back from the edge of despair. "Where are we? Is this the vacation place?" Sarah turned and manufactured a smile that felt like it might crack her face. "Sort of, baby. There was a mix-up with our reservation, but the nice man who lives here is letting us stay until the snow stops. Isn't that kind of him?" Noah rubbed his eyes and climbed out of bed. padding over to press his face against the window. "Wow," he breathed. "We're so high up. We're like in the clouds." "We are," Sarah agreed, kneeling beside him. "Pretty amazing, right? Is the nice man really a nice man?" Noah asked, with the brutal honesty of childhood. "You told me to be careful of strangers. I did, and you should be, but this man, I think he's okay. I think he's just lonely." The words surprised her, but as soon as she said them, Sarah knew they were true. Last night, standing in that kitchen surrounded by millions of dollars of luxury and nothing that looked like it had ever been truly lived in, Ethan Caldwell had looked like the loneliest person she'd ever seen. They ventured out of the guest room 20 minutes later, Noah freshly dressed and Sarah wearing the same clothes from yesterday, because she'd packed so carefully for their supposed vacation, and now all those plans felt like a cruel joke. The apartment looked different in daylight, bigger, more sterile, like a showroom rather than a home. Ethan was in the kitchen, standing at the coffee maker with the intense concentration of someone who rarely used it. He'd traded the towel for jeans and a dark sweater that probably cost more than Sarah made in a month. But his feet were bare, and his hair was still damp, and somehow those small details made him seem almost human. He looked up as they entered, and Sarah watched his entire body tense. "Good morning," he said carefully, his voice neutral. "Coffee, please," Sarah said, matching his tone. "Thank you." Noah, bless his fearless heart, walked right up to the kitchen island and hoisted himself onto one of the bar stools. "This place is like a castle," he announced. "Do you have a dragon?" Despite everything, Sarah saw the corner of Ethan's mouth twitch. "No dragon, sorry to disappoint." "That's okay. Dragons need lots of space anyway." Noah swung his legs, looking around with wide eyes. "Can I explore?" "Noah," Sarah warned. "This isn't our home." "We need to respect—" "Let him explore," Ethan interrupted, surprising them both. "Just stay on this floor. Don't touch anything that looks expensive." He paused. "Which is basically everything. So don't touch anything at all." Noah's grin was bright enough to light the room. "Yes, sir." He hopped down and bounded toward the living room, leaving Sarah and Ethan alone in uncomfortable silence. "I tried to make coffee," Ethan said, gesturing at the expensive machine. "But I think I broke it. My assistant usually handles this." "Your assistant makes your coffee?" Sarah moved closer, examining the machine. "You live alone in this huge place and don't even make your own coffee. Is that judgment I hear?" There was an edge to his voice. "No." Sarah met his eyes. "It's sadness. This apartment is beautiful, but it doesn't feel like anyone lives here. It feels like a museum." Ethan's jaw tightened. "I work a lot. I don't have time for domestic touches. Everyone has time for coffee." Sarah pressed a button, and the machine came to life with a gentle hum. "You just weren't hitting the priming sequence first. Common mistake with these fancy models." "How do you know about expensive coffee makers?" "I clean offices at night, executive suites. I've seen every kind of coffee maker made by man." She poured 2 cups, added milk to hers, and slid his across the counter. "Black, right? You look like someone who drinks it black." "I do." He took a sip, his expression unreadable. "You should know the weather reports are getting worse. They're calling it a historic blizzard. Nothing's moving in or out of the city for at least 48 hours. 48 hours. 2 full days trapped here with this stranger who didn't trust her, in this beautiful space that would never be hers." Sarah felt her throat tighten. "I'll stay out of your way. We'll keep to the guest room. You won't even know we're here." "That's not what I—" Ethan stopped, frustration crossing his face. "Look, if you're going to be here, you might as well make yourself comfortable. Watch TV, use the kitchen, whatever. We don't need your—" "Charity, I know." He set down his coffee cup a little too hard. "You made that clear last night. But you're stuck here whether either of us likes it, so we might as well make the best of it." From the living room, Noah's voice rang out, "Mr. Castleman, what's this thingy do? It's got buttons and lights and it talks." Ethan's eyes widened slightly. "That's my home automation system. Tell him not to—" But it was too late. They heard a series of beeps, and suddenly music began playing throughout the apartment. Classical music. Loud, classical music. The lights dimmed and brightened in what appeared to be some kind of synchronized pattern. The temperature display on the wall began flashing. "Noah!" Sarah rushed toward the living room, but Ethan was faster. She found him kneeling beside her son, examining the control panel that Noah had apparently discovered behind what looked like a decorative panel. Sorry, Noah said, his eyes huge. "I just wanted to see. I didn't mean to break anything." "You didn't break it," Ethan said, and to Sarah's shock his voice was gentle, patient. "You just activated about 6 different systems at once. That's actually kind of impressive." His fingers moved across the panel, deactivating features and restoring order. "You like technology?" Noah nodded vigorously. "I love it. At school, I'm the best at the computer games. And I know how to use Mommy's phone better than she does. That's because I'm ancient," Sarah said dryly. 29 is practically elderly in technology years." Ethan glanced up at her, something flickering in his expression. "You're 29. Is that a problem?" "No, You seem older, more tired." He winced. "That came out wrong." "No, it came out accurate." Sarah crossed her arms. "Single motherhood and poverty will do that to a person." An awkward silence descended. Noah, sensing the tension, tugged on Ethan's sleeve. "Can you show me more? Please. I promise I'll just look, not touch." Ethan studied the boy for a long moment, and Sarah watched something shift in his face, a softening, a crack in whatever wall he kept between himself and the world. "All right," he said finally, "but your mum has to supervise." And we start with the basics. For the next hour, Sarah sat on the pristine white sofa and watched the billionaire CEO teach her 6-year-old about smart home technology, automation systems, and programming basics that she barely understood. Ethan was surprisingly good with Noah, patient, clear in his explanations. He didn't talk down to him, didn't treat him like a child who couldn't understand complex concepts. And Noah bloomed under the attention. He asked questions. He listened. He grinned so wide Sarah's heart ached. This was what she'd wanted to give him, not luxury exactly, but experience, knowledge, a glimpse of a world beyond their small life. "I'm hungry," Noah announced eventually, with the brutal honesty of childhood. "Is it lunchtime yet?" Sarah glanced at her phone. It was nearly 1 in the afternoon. "Let me make something. I brought supplies. The cereal you spilled all over my floor last night." Ethan stood, brushing off his jeans. "I had housekeeping come early this morning to clean it up." "You have housekeeping on a Saturday during a blizzard?" "She lives in the building, and I pay very well." He moved to the kitchen and opened the massive refrigerator. "I have food. Lots of food, actually. My assistant stocks it weekly. I just never actually cook any of it." Sarah joined him, peering at the contents. "You have truffle butter. Who has truffle butter they never use?" "Someone who doesn't cook." He pulled out ingredients seemingly at random. "Can you make something from this?" Sarah looked at the expensive cuts of meat, the exotic vegetables, the gourmet ingredients that probably cost more than her weekly grocery budget. "I can make something from anything. That's kind of my superpower." "Then consider it payment for putting up with being trapped here. I thought you said it wasn't charity." "It's not." Ethan met her eyes. "It's self-preservation. If I have to eat another meal delivered by courier, I might lose my mind. And based on the weather reports, delivery isn't happening today anyway." Something about the admission, the vulnerability underneath it, made Sarah's chest tighten. "Okay," she said softly. "I'll make lunch. But then we're even." "Deal." Sarah cooked the way her grandmother had taught her, with love and attention and the knowledge that food was more than sustenance. It was comfort. It was care. It was saying, "You matter," without using words. She made a simple pasta with vegetables and grilled chicken, using herbs she found in the refrigerator that had probably been there untouched for weeks. The smell that filled the apartment was domestic and warm, and completely at odds with the sterile perfection of the space. She glanced over her shoulder and found Ethan standing in the doorway, watching her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Hunger, maybe, but not for food. "When's the last time someone cooked in this kitchen?" Sarah asked. "Never," Ethan admitted. "I bought the place 2 months ago. Everything's new. Everything's unused. That's the saddest thing I've heard in a long time." "Is it?" His voice was quiet. "I think there are sadder things than having an unused kitchen." Sarah turned to face him fully. "Like what?" "Like working yourself to exhaustion for a year to give your son one nice weekend, only to have it stolen by criminals. That seems pretty sad to me." The unexpected compassion in his voice made tears prick at Sarah's eyes. She blinked them back. "We survive. That's what we do. Noah and me, we survive. You shouldn't have to just survive." "Yeah, well, should doesn't pay the bills." She turned back to the stove, stirring the pasta with more force than necessary. "Lunch is ready. Call Noah." They ate at the kitchen island, the three of them perched on bar stools that probably cost more than Sarah's monthly rent. Noah chatted happily about the snow and the castle and all the amazing technology he'd learned about. Ethan listened with attention that seemed genuine, asking questions and actually caring about the answers. Sarah watched them and felt something shift in her chest. Something dangerous. Something that felt like hope. After lunch, Noah wanted to watch the snowfall, so they ended up in the living room together. Ethan sat in an armchair that looked like it had never been sat in. Sarah curled on the sofa with Noah beside her, and they watched the storm rage outside while inside, inexplicably, something began to warm. By Sunday, the snow had stopped falling, but the city remained buried and frozen. Sarah woke to find Noah had already escaped the guest room. Following the smell of something that reminded her of her grandmother's kitchen, she found him in the living room with Ethan, both of them sitting cross-legged on the floor, surrounded by pieces of what appeared to be a robotics kit. "Mommy," Noah's face lit up. "Look, Ethan found this old robot kit in his office and we're building it together." "Ethan?" Sarah raised an eyebrow at the man who just 2 days ago had been Mr. Caldwell, the suspicious billionaire who'd caught them breaking into his apartment. Ethan had the grace to look slightly embarrassed. He asked if he could call me that. It seemed easier than Mr. Castleman. "I bought this years ago," he continued, gesturing to the kit. "I was going to, I don't know, learn something new. Remember what it felt like to build something with my hands instead of just signing papers and attending meetings." He picked up a small servo motor, turning it over in his fingers. "Then I got busy, forgot about it. Forgot about a lot of things." Sarah settled onto the floor beside them, watching as Ethan showed Noah how to connect the circuit boards, his voice patient and warm in a way that seemed to surprise even himself. Noah's small hands followed Ethan's larger ones, both of them bent over the project with identical expressions of concentration. "This is the power supply," Ethan explained. "Without it, nothing works. It's like the heart of the robot. Everything else depends on it being strong and reliable." "Like Mommy," Noah said simply. "She's the heart. She makes everything work." Sarah's breath caught. Ethan glanced at her, something unreadable crossing his face. "Yeah," he said quietly. "Exactly like that." They worked on the robot for hours, breaking only for the lunch Sarah insisted on making, because apparently the billionaire CEO lived on delivered meals and protein shakes when left to his own devices. She found herself moving through his kitchen with increasing familiarity, learning where he kept things, understanding the logic of a space designed for entertaining that had never seen a guest. "Tell me something," Sarah said as they ate. "Why do you live here alone, in this huge place? Don't you have family, friends?" Ethan's expression shuttered. "I have a mother in Connecticut, a sister in California. As for friends," he shrugged, "business associates, acquaintances, people who want things from me. Does that count?" "No," Noah said with the brutal honesty of childhood. "Friends are people who like you even when you don't have stuff to give them." Ethan stared at the 6-year-old, and Sarah watched something crack in his carefully maintained facade. "Then no," he admitted, "I don't have friends." "That's sad," Noah declared. "Everyone needs friends. You can be our friend if you want. We don't want your stuff. We just think you're nice." Sarah saw the moment Ethan's composure fractured, his throat worked, his jaw tightened, and he looked away quickly, but not before she caught the shine of unexpected emotion in his eyes. "Thank you," he managed. "Thank you, Noah." The afternoon passed with surprising ease. They finished the robot, a simple, wheeled creation that could navigate basic obstacles. Noah was enchanted, driving it around the apartment with shouts of joy that filled the space with life it had probably never contained. Ethan watched with an expression that looked almost like wonder, as if he'd forgotten such uncomplicated happiness was possible. As evening approached, Sarah found herself in the kitchen again, this time with Ethan attempting to help. He was terrible at it, cutting vegetables with the careful precision of someone who'd learned knife skills from YouTube videos and had never put them into practice. But he tried, and there was something endearing about watching this powerful, wealthy man struggle with something as simple as dicing an onion. "Why don't you have someone who lives here?" Sarah asked as she seasoned the chicken. "A housekeeper, a cook, someone to make this feel less like a museum and more like a home." "I did," Ethan said. "For a while. After something bad happened. But I couldn't stand it. Couldn't stand having someone here all the time, watching me, knowing my routines, seeing me when I was vulnerable." He set down the knife. "I know how that sounds. Paranoid, probably insane." "It sounds lonely," Sarah said softly. "And sad. And like someone hurt you really badly." Ethan's hands stilled. "Her name was Vanessa, my ex-fiancée. We were together for 3 years, engaged for one. She was beautiful and brilliant and ambitious, and I thought she loved me." His laugh was bitter. "Turns out she loved the access, the information. She sold stories about me to tabloids, sold proprietary code from my company to competitors, made millions while I trusted her completely." "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "That's awful. It taught me an important lesson. Trust is a liability. Vulnerability is a weakness. The only safe way to live is alone." Sarah turned to face him fully. "And how's that working out for you? That safe, lonely life in your beautiful cage?" The question hung between them, sharp and honest. Ethan met her eyes, and for a moment she saw past all his walls to the wounded man underneath. "It's terrible," he admitted. "It's absolutely terrible. I'm successful and powerful and completely miserable, and I don't know how to be any different." "Maybe," Sarah said gently, "you start by letting people in, even when it's scary, even when you're not sure you can trust them, because the alternative is this." She gestured around the sterile apartment. Beautiful and perfect and dead. Before Ethan could respond, Noah came racing in. "The robot stopped working. I think the battery died." Ethan knelt beside him, examining the robot with that same patient focus. "You're right. Good diagnosis. Want to learn how to change the battery?" As Noah nodded enthusiastically, Sarah watched the two of them bend over the small machine, their heads close together, and felt something dangerous bloom in her chest. Something that felt like possibility, like hope. like the beginning of something she had absolutely no business feeling for a man she'd known for 3 days, who lived in a world she'd never belonged to, who'd made it clear he trusted no one. But watching him now, seeing the gentleness in his hands as he guided Noah through the battery replacement, hearing the quiet patience in his voice, this wasn't the paranoid billionaire who'd caught them trespassing. This was someone else, someone softer, someone who maybe, underneath all that armor, was just as lonely and scared as she was. After dinner, after Noah had been coaxed into the bath and then bed, Sarah found herself standing at the living room windows with Ethan, watching the snow-covered city glitter under a clear night sky. The storm had passed. Tomorrow, the roads would clear. Tomorrow, they'd leave this beautiful cage and return to their real lives. Tomorrow, this strange interlude would end. "Thank you," Sarah said into the comfortable silence that had somehow developed between them, "for letting us stay, for being kind to Noah, for making this disaster of a weekend into something bearable." "Bearable?" Ethan's laugh was soft. "Sarah, this is the most alive I've felt in 6 years. Your son is incredible. And you came into my sterile museum and made it feel like a home for the first time since I bought it. We're leaving tomorrow," she reminded him gently. "Back to our real lives." "I know." He turned to face her, and in the dim light, his eyes looked darker, more vulnerable than she'd seen them. "But what if—" "Don't," Sarah interrupted. "Please don't. Don't say something that will make leaving harder. Don't offer things that can't last. We're from different worlds, Ethan. This was an accident, a beautiful accident, maybe, but still an accident. What if I don't want it to be an accident?" His voice was barely above a whisper. "What if I want to see you again, see Noah? What if 3 days in my fortress taught me that I've been living wrong?" Sarah's heart hammered against her ribs. Every instinct screamed danger. Rich men were controlling. Rich men used their money as weapons. Rich men like Kevin had taught her that accepting help was just the beginning of losing herself. But when she looked at Ethan, she didn't see Kevin. She saw someone wounded and lonely and learning, maybe for the first time, that walls built for safety could become prisons. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Scared of what it would mean to let you into our lives. Scared of what happens when you realize we don't fit in your world. Scared of Noah getting attached to someone who might disappear. Scared of being hurt again," Ethan finished. "I understand. I'm scared too. Terrified, actually. But I'm more scared of watching you walk out tomorrow and spending the rest of my life wondering what if." They stood there, close enough to touch, but not touching, the weight of possibility hanging between them. Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle flakes drifting past the windows like a benediction. And somewhere in the guest room, Noah slept peacefully, dreaming of robots and castles and the nice man who turned their disaster into something magical. "One more day," Sarah heard herself say. "The roads are still dangerous. We could stay one more day if you want." "I want," Ethan said immediately. "God, Sarah, I want. But then we need to talk, really talk, about what this is, what it could be. What happens when we're not trapped together by a snowstorm and reality comes crashing back in? We'll talk," he promised. "We'll figure it out, together." Sarah nodded, not trusting her voice, because somewhere in the past 3 days, something had shifted. The stranger in the towel had become Ethan, who was patient with her son and vulnerable about his loneliness and learning to laugh again in his beautiful, empty fortress. And she was terrified of what that meant. Terrified of hope, terrified of wanting something she'd convinced herself she could never have, but tomorrow could wait. Tonight, there was just this moment, this connection, this fragile beginning of something that felt like it might be worth the risk. Even if that risk was everything, Monday morning arrived with weak winter sunlight streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting everything in shades of silver and gold. Sarah woke to find Noah already gone from the bed, his laughter echoing from somewhere deeper in the apartment. The storm had finally passed, leaving behind a crystalline world that looked like it belonged in a snow globe rather than reality. She should be packing, should be arranging transportation back to Brooklyn, should be putting distance between herself and this accidental intimacy that was starting to feel dangerously comfortable. Instead, she found herself padding barefoot through the penthouse, following the sound of her son's joy. Ethan was on the phone in what she now recognized as his office, speaking in that crisp, commanding voice that reminded her he wasn't just a lonely man who built robots with 6-year-olds. He was a CEO, a billionaire, someone who lived in a stratosphere so far above her own that she needed oxygen just to visit. "No, I understand the concerns," he was saying, his free hand gesturing sharply, even though whoever was on the other end couldn't see him. "But the merger timeline doesn't change just because we had a snowstorm. I want the revised proposals on my desk by Wednesday morning. No excuses." He glanced up and saw her standing in the doorway. Something shifted in his expression, softening the hard edges. "I have to go," he said into the phone. "We'll continue this later." He disconnected without waiting for a response. "I'm sorry," Sarah said. "I didn't mean to interrupt. I was just looking for Noah. He's safe. I set him up with a coding game on one of my tablets. He's in the living room, building virtual worlds and probably doing a better job of it than my actual programmers." Ethan stood, and Sarah noticed the circles under his eyes. "Did you sleep at all?" "Did you?" "Not much." He moved closer, and Sarah's breath caught at the intensity in his gaze. "I kept thinking about what you said, about this being an accident, about us leaving today. The roads are clearing," Sarah said, but the words felt hollow. "We should go, get back to our real lives. What if I don't want you to go?" The question hung between them, raw and honest. "What if I want to show you my world, really show you, not just the apartment? Let me take you and Noah somewhere, today, before you leave." "Ethan, one afternoon," he pressed. "A few hours. You gave me 3 days of life in my dead museum. Let me give you a few hours of, I don't know, whatever it is billionaires do when they're trying to impress people." Despite everything, Sarah smiled. "Do you even know what that is? What normal people find impressive?" "Absolutely not," he admitted with surprising candor. "Which is why I need you to tell me if I'm getting it completely wrong." An hour later, Sarah found herself in the back of a car that probably cost more than she'd earned in 5 years, with Noah pressed against the window, exclaiming over every landmark they passed. Ethan sat beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating from his body, far enough that they maintained the careful distance of people who didn't quite trust what was building between them. They ended up at the Museum of Natural History, which Noah had been begging to visit for months, but which Sarah had never been able to afford. Watching her son's face light up as they walked beneath the enormous blue whale suspended from the ceiling, Sarah felt her throat tighten with emotions she couldn't name. Gratitude, guilt, hope, fear, all tangled together in a knot she couldn't unravel. "Thank you for this," she said quietly, as Noah raced ahead to the dinosaur exhibit. "You didn't have to. I wanted to." Ethan's hands were shoved deep in his pockets, his shoulders tense. "I wanted to see him happy. Wanted to see you happy. I'm happy watching my son be happy. That's always been enough." "Should it be, though?" He turned to face her fully. "Should survival and small joys be enough? Shouldn't there be more?" "More costs money," Sarah said bluntly, "and money is something I work 16 hours a day for and still never have enough of. So yes, small joys have to be enough. They're all I've got." Something fierce crossed Ethan's face. "What if they didn't have to be? Don't..." Sarah's voice was sharper than she intended. "Please don't go where I think you're going. Don't offer to solve my problems with your money. That's not what this is. That's not what I want from you." "Then what do you want?" The question was so direct, so vulnerable, that Sarah found herself answering with equal honesty. I don't know. I'm terrified to even think about wanting anything beyond making it through the next month without getting evicted or having the power shut off. Wanting more feels like tempting fate. Mommy, Ethan, look at the T-Rex. It's huge. Noah's shout saved her from having to elaborate, and they spent the next 2 hours wandering through exhibits, with Ethan explaining scientific concepts in ways that made Noah's eyes go wide with wonder and made Sarah realize just how brilliant the man beside her actually was. Back at the penthouse, as Noah napped off the excitement of the afternoon, Sarah volunteered to make dinner, not because she had to, but because it gave her hands something to do while her mind spun in circles, trying to process what was happening to her carefully constructed walls. She was pulling ingredients from the refrigerator when Ethan's phone rang. He glanced at the screen and his entire body tensed. I should take this, he said, his voice gone flat. It's my mother. Sarah nodded and focused on chopping vegetables, but she couldn't help overhearing his side of the conversation. Hello, Mother. Yes, I'm aware the storm has passed. No, I haven't been to the office. Because I've been dealing with a situation here. It's complicated. No, not a business complication. Personal. There was a long pause, and Sarah could hear a woman's voice through the phone, sharp and cutting even from across the room. I don't think that's any of your concern, Ethan said, his tone cooling further. Yes, there's someone staying here. A woman and her son. No, it's not what you're implying. They were victims of a rental scam and got trapped here by the storm. Mother, I really don't appreciate... The voice on the other end rose in volume, and Sarah caught fragments. Taking advantage. People like that. Your position. Reputation. Her hands stilled on the cutting board. People like that. She knew exactly what that meant. People who cleaned offices and served coffee and didn't have trust funds or family connections or the right last names. That's enough, Ethan said, his voice gone cold as the snow outside. I'm going to pretend you didn't just say that about someone you've never met, someone who's shown more grace and kindness in 3 days than you've managed in 3 years. I'll call you later. Goodbye, Mother. He disconnected and stood for a moment, his back to Sarah, tension radiating from every line of his body. When he finally turned around, his expression was carefully neutral. I'm sorry you had to hear that. I've heard worse, Sarah said quietly. I work in service. I know what people with money think of people like me. Usually they just have the decency to wait until we're out of the room before saying it out loud. She doesn't speak for me. Doesn't she, though? Sarah set down the knife and turned to face him fully. Ethan, she's your mother. She knows you, knows your world. And she's right about one thing. We don't belong in it. Noah and I, we're... She struggled for the right words. We're a weekend anomaly. A snowstorm story you'll tell at dinner parties. We're not real in your world. You're the most real thing that's happened to me in 6 years. He crossed the kitchen in 3 strides, stopping just short of touching her. My mother is bitter and classist, and so caught up in social hierarchies that she's forgotten how to be human. I'm not her. I don't see you the way she does. How do you see me? The question came out as barely a whisper, and the answer seemed to matter more than Sarah wanted to admit. Ethan's hands came up slowly, carefully, giving her time to move away. When she didn't, he cupped her face with a gentleness that made her chest ache. I see someone brave, he said softly. Someone who works herself to exhaustion for her son. Someone who maintains her dignity even when life keeps trying to strip it away. Someone who walked into a stranger's apartment and made it feel like a home. His thumb traced her cheekbone. I see you, Sarah. Really see you. And I don't want to stop seeing you just because the storm is over. I'm scared, she admitted, not of you, of what wanting this might cost me. I've spent 5 years building walls, teaching myself that needing anyone is dangerous, and now you're asking me to risk that hard-won safety for something that might not even be real. It's real. His forehead pressed against hers. This feeling like I can finally breathe, like the fortress I've been living in suddenly has windows. That's real. You made that real. Sarah's hands came up to rest against his chest, feeling his heartbeat thundering beneath her palms. Your mother isn't wrong about everything. We are from different worlds. Eventually, that's going to matter. Then we'll deal with it when it does. Together. He pulled back just enough to meet her eyes. Stay for dinner. Stay tonight. Tomorrow we'll figure out what this is and whether it can survive outside these walls. But right now, in this moment, can we just be? She should say no. Should protect herself and Noah from inevitable heartbreak. Should remember that rich men were dangerous, that accepting care was the first step toward losing control, that fairy tales didn't happen to waitresses from Brooklyn. But when she looked at Ethan, she didn't see a rich man. She saw someone lonely and wounded and learning to hope again, just like she was. And maybe, just maybe, that was worth the risk. Okay, she whispered. We can be. The conversation over dinner started safe. Noah's favorite subjects at school, Ethan's least favorite parts of running a company, Sarah's grandmother's recipes that she'd modified to work with whatever ingredients she could afford. Surface-level sharing that felt like testing the waters before diving into deeper depths. But after Noah was settled in bed, after the dishes were done, and they were alone with wine and honesty, and 3 days of accumulated trust, the conversation shifted into something more raw. Tell me about your ex-husband, Ethan said. They were on the sofa, careful inches between them, the city lights glittering beyond the windows. You mentioned him that first night. Said I reminded you of him. Sarah took a long sip of wine, gathering courage. His name is Kevin. We met in community college. I was 18, working part-time to pay tuition, taking care of my dad after a construction accident. Kevin was charming, attentive. He promised he'd take care of me, that I could stop working so hard, that he'd make life easier. Let me guess, Ethan said quietly. The promises came with strings. So many strings I couldn't move without permission by the end. Sarah stared into her wineglass, watching the dark liquid swirl. At first it was small things. He'd want to know where I was going, who I'd be with. Said it was because he worried, because he loved me. Then it was money. He controlled our accounts, gave me an allowance, made me ask for everything. Said it was more efficient, that I was bad with finances. She paused, swallowing hard. By the time I got pregnant with Noah, I'd lost touch with all my friends, stopped going to school, stopped having dreams that weren't his dreams. And the worst part, I let it happen. I was so tired of struggling, so desperate for someone to make life easier, that I gave him everything. My autonomy, my identity, myself. That's not your fault, Ethan said, his voice tight. That's manipulation, abuse. I know that now. But when he left, when I found out he'd drained our accounts and maxed out credit cards in my name and disappeared, I made myself a promise. Never again. Never depend on anyone. Never let someone use money as a weapon. Never mistake control for care. She finally looked at Ethan. So, when you offer help, when you want to solve my problems, when you suggest that money could make things easier, all I hear is Kevin. All I feel is that same trap closing around me. Ethan was quiet for a long moment, his jaw working. I understand, he finally said. And I'm sorry. I'm sorry he did that to you. I'm sorry that my impulse to help feels like a threat. I'm sorry that I'm so bad at this, that I don't know how to show I care without throwing money at problems. Tell me about Vanessa, Sarah said. Fair's fair. I showed you my scars. Show me yours. He laughed, but there was no humor in it. Where do I start? We met at a tech conference. She was brilliant, had a master's in computer science, worked for a startup I was considering acquiring. We talked for hours about code and innovation and the future. I thought I'd found my equal, my partner. What happened? She sold me. The words were flat, matter of fact, but Sarah could hear the pain underneath. Stories to tabloids about my private life, my habits, my routines, my vulnerabilities. Proprietary code from my company to competitors. She made millions while I built a life with her, planned a future, introduced her to everyone who mattered. He stood abruptly, moving to the windows, his shoulders rigid. The worst part wasn't the money or the business damage. It was realizing that every intimate moment, every vulnerability I'd shared, every piece of myself I'd given her, she'd been cataloging it, calculating its market value, using me. How did you find out? A reporter called me for comment on a story about my father's death. Quoted things only Vanessa knew, things I'd told her in confidence when I was grieving. His reflection in the window showed a man barely holding himself together. I hired investigators, found the paper trail, the offshore accounts, the correspondence with my competitors. 3 years of my life had been a long con. Sarah stood and moved to stand beside him, not touching but close enough to offer presence. So you built walls, locked everyone out, decided isolation was safer than risk. Exactly like you did after Kevin. We're quite a pair, Sarah said softly. 2 wounded people who've convinced themselves that being alone is the same as being safe. Ethan turned to her, and his eyes were bright with unshed tears. Except I'm not alone right now, and for the first time in 6 years, I don't feel safe. I feel terrified, but I also feel alive, and I think maybe that's worth it. Worth what? Worth risking everything. Worth believing that not everyone is Vanessa. Worth hoping that you're the real thing and not another beautiful lie. He reached for her hand, his fingers trembling slightly. Sarah, I know it's only been 3 days. I know that's insane. But I need you to know that what I feel when I look at you, when I watch you with Noah, when you're in my kitchen making this mausoleum feel like a home, that's not nothing. That's everything. Sarah's breath caught. Ethan, I work 2 jobs just to barely survive. I live paycheck to paycheck in a neighborhood you've probably never even driven through. I can't offer you fancy dinners or museum trips or anything except me and Noah and a life that's messy and exhausting and ordinary. Do you think I care about that? His hands framed her face. Sarah, you've given me more in 3 days than anyone has in 6 years. You've given me hope. You've reminded me what it feels like to laugh, to build something with my hands, to eat a meal that tastes like love instead of just fuel. You've shown me that my fortress is a prison and that real wealth isn't measured in dollars. You're going to break my heart, she whispered. When this ends, when reality crashes back in, when you realize that someone like me doesn't fit in someone like you's life, you're going to break my heart. Then we'll both be broken together, because you're already breaking mine just thinking about leaving. He leaned in slowly, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Tell me to stop. Tell me this is crazy. Tell me we should just walk away before it gets worse. But Sarah couldn't, because he was right. This was crazy and terrifying, and probably doomed to end in heartbreak. But it was also real. The most real thing she'd felt since Noah was born. The first time in 5 years she'd wanted something just for herself, not because it was practical or necessary or the next step in survival. She wanted Ethan Caldwell. Wanted his vulnerability and his loneliness and his fierce desire to be better than his damage. Wanted the way he looked at Noah like the boy was precious. Wanted the way he saw her, really saw her, not as a charity case or a conquest, but as a person worth knowing. I can't tell you to stop, she said, her voice breaking. I should, but I can't, because I want this too, even knowing it's probably a mistake, even knowing it might destroy me. I want it. The kiss, when it came, was nothing like she'd expected. It wasn't passionate or demanding or the kind of kiss that swept away thought and reason. It was gentle, tentative, a question more than an answer, a beginning rather than a claiming. His lips were soft against hers, his hands trembling in her hair, and she could taste the wine on his tongue and something else, something that tasted like hope, They stood there for long minutes, learning each other through touch and breath and the slow building of trust. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, the air between them felt charged with possibility and terror in equal measure. "I want you to know something," Ethan said, his forehead still pressed to hers. "Whatever this is, whatever it becomes, I'm not Kevin. I won't control you. I won't use money as a weapon. I won't try to make you smaller so I can feel bigger. I just want to know you, be with you, see where this goes without walls or pretense or fear running everything." "I want that too," Sarah admitted, "but I'm still scared of getting hurt, of Noah getting hurt, of wanting something I can't have and losing myself trying to reach it." "Then we'll be scared together." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. "We'll take it slow. We'll figure it out. And if it doesn't work, if the differences are too much, at least we'll know we tried." Sarah was about to respond when Ethan's phone buzzed loudly on the coffee table. He ignored it, but it buzzed again and again. Finally, he pulled away with a frustrated sound and grabbed it. "It's Marcus, my head of security." He frowned at the screen. "He's calling repeatedly. That usually means, 'I'm sorry, I need to take this.'" Sarah watched as he answered, saw his entire body go rigid with whatever he was hearing. His face drained of color, his jaw clenched, and when he looked at her, something cold flickered in his eyes. Something that looked like suspicion, like fear, like the walls slamming back into place so fast she could hear them lock. "I understand," he said into the phone, his voice gone flat. "Email me the full report. We'll address it in the morning." He disconnected and stood there, the phone in his hand, staring at Sarah like he was seeing her for the first time. "What's wrong?" Sarah asked, though part of her already knew, already felt the foundation they'd built cracking beneath her feet. "The door code," Ethan said slowly. "The one you used to get in here. Marcus's team has been investigating the breach. They have concerns." "What kind of concerns?" "The kind that suggest this might not have been a simple scam. The kind that make me wonder if everything that happened this weekend was planned, orchestrated." His eyes were hard now, all the softness gone. "Tell me the truth, Sarah. Who sent you here? What do they want from me?" The words hit her like a physical blow. You think I planned this? That I deliberately broke into your apartment with my 6-year-old son as part of some scheme?" "I don't know what to think." But his voice said he knew exactly what to think, and it was breaking Sarah's heart in real time. "I've been here before, Sarah. I've trusted before, and it destroyed me." "I'm not Vanessa," Sarah said, her voice shaking with hurt and anger. "I'm not some con artist. I'm a single mother who got scammed trying to give her son a nice birthday weekend. That's it. That's the whole story." "Is it?" Ethan took a step back, and that step was more painful than any words could have been. "Because the timing is convenient, the code working when it shouldn't, the storm keeping you here, every word designed to get past my defenses, every moment calculated to make me trust you." Sarah felt something inside her shatter. After everything they'd shared, every vulnerability, every moment of connection, he still saw her as a threat, still believed that someone like her was only in his world to take something. "You know what?" she said, her voice eerily calm despite the tears burning behind her eyes. "You were right about the walls. They do keep you safe, but they also keep you alone, and you deserve that. You deserve every second of that loneliness." She turned and walked toward the guest room, her vision blurring. Behind her, she heard Ethan call her name, heard something like regret in his voice. But she didn't stop, didn't look back. Because she'd been right the first time. Fairy tales didn't happen to waitresses from Brooklyn, and billionaires in towers always believed the worst. Sarah barely slept. She lay in the guest room, with Noah curled against her side, staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of the past 4 days. Every conversation, every touch, Every time she'd convinced herself that maybe, just maybe, this broken billionaire could see past his walls long enough to trust what they were building together. She'd been a fool. Again, different man, different circumstances, same ending. The moment things got complicated, the moment his security team whispered suspicions, he'd looked at her and seen a threat instead of a person, seen a con instead of a connection, and the worst part, she understood. She'd done the same thing, hadn't she? Looked at him offering help and seen Kevin with his controlling hands and his weaponized generosity. They were both too damaged for this, too scared, too broken. When grey dawn finally filtered through the windows, Sarah rose quietly and began packing their few belongings. The museum clothes Noah had never gotten to wear for a full vacation, the cereal boxes that had exploded across Ethan's perfect floor that first night, the pieces of a dream that had never been real to begin with. "Mommy?" Noah stirred, his voice thick with sleep. "Are we leaving?" "Yes, baby. It's time to go home." "But what about Ethan and the robot? He said we could add a sensor today so it could avoid walls by itself." Sarah's heart cracked. "Ethan has to work, sweetheart. He's a very busy man, and we've imposed on his kindness long enough. Did something bad happen?" Noah sat up, his 6-year-old intuition picking up on the tension vibrating through her. "Did you have a fight?" "Adults sometimes disagree about things," Sarah said carefully. "It's nobody's fault. It happens." Before Noah could ask more questions, there was a soft knock on the door. Sarah's whole body tensed. "Yes, it's me." Ethan's voice was muffled through the wood. "Can we talk, please?" "There's nothing to talk about." Sarah continued folding clothes with more force than necessary. "We'll be out of your way in 20 minutes. "Sarah, I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said what I said. I was scared, triggered, reverting to old patterns." She yanked open the door, and the sight of him made her anger falter for just a moment. He looked terrible, exhausted, haunted, like he'd spent the night wrestling with demons and losing. "I get it, Ethan, I really do. Your ex hurt you. You have trust issues, but so do I. And the difference is, when push came to shove, I chose to believe in you anyway. You chose suspicion." "I know!" His voice was raw. "I know, and I'm sorry, but there are things you don't understand. The security breach, the timing, the way everything lined up too perfectly." "Stop!" Sarah held up her hand. "Just stop. I don't need to hear the justifications. I don't need you to explain why you think I might be scamming you. What I needed was for you to know me well enough after 4 days to know I would never do that. But you don't. You can't. Because you're so locked in your fortress of fear that you can't see what's real, even when it's standing right in front of you." "You're right." The admission seemed to cost him. "You're absolutely right. And I don't know how to fix that. I don't know how to be different than this." "Then maybe you shouldn't try." Sarah's voice softened, the anger draining into something sadder. "Maybe we were both fooling ourselves thinking 4 days could undo 5 years of damage. Maybe some people are just meant to stay behind their walls." She closed the door gently and heard him lean against it from the other side, heard something that might have been a broken sound, but she steeled herself against it, against the part of her that wanted to open the door and tell him it was okay. They could work through it. They could try again, because that was the part of her that had stayed with Kevin for 3 years. The part that made excuses and accepted apologies and slowly lost herself piece by piece. Never again. She'd promised herself, never again. 30 minutes later, Sarah and Noah were in the elevator heading down from the penthouse, their bags at their feet and the weight of ended possibilities pressing on Sarah's chest. The elevator doors were closing when a hand shot through, forcing them open. A woman stood there. Late 60s, impeccably dressed in clothes that whispered old money and older judgments. Her hair was perfect silver, styled in a way that probably required a standing appointment at Manhattan's most expensive salon. Her eyes were cold blue chips that swept over Sarah and Noah with the kind of assessment usually reserved for potential threats or purchases. "You must be the house guest," the woman said, stepping into the elevator without asking permission. "I'm Victoria Caldwell, Ethan's mother." Sarah's stomach dropped. Of course this would happen. "We were just leaving, Mrs. Caldwell." "I can see that." Victoria's gaze lingered on Sarah's worn coat, the second-hand duffel bag, Noah's scuffed sneakers. "Though I must say, I'm surprised you stayed as long as you did. Most people in your situation would have taken the hint sooner." "Mom likes Ethan," Noah piped up with the brutal honesty of childhood. "And Ethan likes us. We built a robot together." "How charming!" Victoria's smile didn't reach her eyes. "I'm sure my son was very entertained by your visit. He does have a tendency toward charitable impulses." The word charitable hit like a slap. Sarah felt her spine straighten, her chin lift in that defensive posture she'd perfected over years of being dismissed and underestimated. "We weren't a charity case, Mrs. Caldwell. We were victims of a crime who needed temporary shelter during a storm. Of course, a crime that conveniently placed you in my son's home with access to his private spaces, his computer systems, his trust." Victoria examined her perfectly manicured nails. "You must understand, Miss Miller, Sarah Miller. Miss Miller, you must understand that people in my son's position are frequent targets. Women who see dollar signs instead of human beings. Women who manufacture situations that seem innocent but are actually carefully calculated to extract money or information or access." Her eyes fixed on Sarah with laser precision. "I've seen it before, many times. And you think that's what I'm doing?" Sarah's voice was dangerously quiet. "You think I brought my 6-year-old son into a stranger's home as part of some elaborate scheme? I think desperation makes people do regrettable things. And you do seem quite desperate." The elevator dinged, doors opening onto the lobby. Sarah grabbed their bags and Noah's hand, moving past Victoria with every ounce of dignity she could muster, but at the threshold she turned back. "You're right about one thing, Mrs. Caldwell. I am desperate to give my son a good life, desperate to make ends meet. Desperate to maintain my dignity, while people like you look at me and see only what I don't have, instead of who I am." Sarah's voice didn't waver. "But what you're wrong about is thinking that makes me dangerous. Your son is surrounded by people who want things from him because of his money. I wanted nothing except a chance to give my son a special birthday. And for 4 days, your son was happy, really, genuinely happy. I saw it. Noah saw it. Everyone except you saw it, apparently. Happiness built on deception is hardly worth celebrating." There was no deception. Sarah's exhaustion bled through into her words. "But it doesn't matter. I can see where your son learned to see threats everywhere. The apple doesn't fall far from the tree, does it?" She walked away before Victoria could respond, her hand tight around Noah's, her vision blurring with tears she refused to shed in front of that woman. They made it to the street before Noah tugged on her hand. "That lady was mean," he said quietly. "Why was she so mean?" "Some people think money makes them better than other people," Sarah said, flagging down a taxi they couldn't afford, but she couldn't face the subway right now. "She's wrong, but she believes it. And that's sad for her. Is Ethan like that too?" Sarah thought about the man who'd taught Noah about coding, who'd looked at her like she was precious, who'd kissed her like she was his last chance at happiness. Then she thought about the suspicion in his eyes last night, the way he'd looked at her like she was a stranger, a threat. "I don't know, baby," she admitted. "I really don't know." The diner where Sarah worked was called Rita's, and it was the kind of place that had existed in Brooklyn for 40 years, without changing much except the price of coffee. Red vinyl booths, linoleum floors, a jukebox that still played actual records, and Rita Collins behind the counter, a woman in her mid-60s who'd bought the place 30 years ago and treated her staff like family. Rita took one look at Sarah's face when she came in for her shift Friday evening and immediately sent her to the back room. "Sit," she ordered, pouring coffee that was probably 3 hours old, but tasted like comfort anyway. "Talk." So Sarah talked about the rental scam and the penthouse and the man in the towel and 4 days of accidentally falling for someone completely wrong for her, about his suspicion and his mother's cruelty and the way hope had turned to ash in her chest. "Men," Rita said when Sarah finally ran out of words, "especially rich ones. They think money protects them, but all it does is build walls so high they can't see over them anymore." "I knew better," Sarah said into her coffee cup. "I knew from the first second that this was a mistake, that someone like him and someone like me, we don't work. We can't work." "Why not?" Rita's eyes were sharp. "Because he has money and you don't, because he lives in a tower and you live in a walk-up. That's just logistics, honey. What matters is whether you see each other's souls, whether you're brave enough to risk your hearts." "He's not brave enough. He proved that." "And are you?" The question landed like a challenge. "Are you brave enough? Or did you run the second things got hard, because it was easier than fighting for what you wanted?" Sarah opened her mouth to argue, then closed it, because Rita had a point. Yes, Ethan had doubted her. Yes, his mother had been cruel. But had Sarah fought? Had she tried to make him understand? Or had she done what she always did, protected herself by leaving first, before she could be left? "It doesn't matter now," Sarah said finally. "It's over. And honestly, it's better this way. Noah and I, we don't need complications. We don't need some billionaire's drama in our lives." Rita just looked at her with those all-knowing eyes that had seen through 3 ex-husbands and 40 years of humanity passing through her diner. "If you say so, honey, but for what it's worth, in all the years I've known you, I've never seen you light up the way you did when you were talking about him. Not once. Not even before Kevin broke you down." Sarah had no answer to that, so she tied on her apron and went to work, serving coffee and taking orders and pretending her heart wasn't somewhere in a penthouse 38 floors above the city, breaking into pieces. Ethan stood in his apartment and understood, for the first time in 6 years, what it meant to be truly alone. Because he'd been alone before Sarah. He'd been isolated and protected and safe. But now the silence wasn't peaceful. It was suffocating. The perfection wasn't beautiful. It was sterile. Every corner held a memory of her laugh or Noah's questions or the smell of real food being cooked with real love. He'd destroyed it. With his suspicion and his fear and his inability to choose trust over trauma. "I need the complete analysis," he said into his phone, talking to Marcus Bennett, his head of security. "Everything you found, everything you suspect. Every piece of evidence that made you think Sarah Miller was somehow part of this scam. Mr. Caldwell, we went over this last night. We went over your suspicions last night. Now I want facts. I want you to prove to me that the woman who cooked in my kitchen and made me laugh and looked at me like I was more than a bank account was actually a criminal. Prove it, Marcus. With evidence, not paranoia." There was a long silence. "Sir, with all due respect, I'm paid to be paranoid. That's my job. Your job is to keep me safe, not to keep me alone." Ethan moved to the windows where he and Sarah had stood just last night, talking about walls and risk and choosing to try. "Send me everything. I'll review it myself." An hour later, Ethan sat at his desk, surrounded by security reports, and his stomach sinking with every page. Because Marcus's case was thin, circumstantial, based on patterns and possibilities, and the kind of suspicion that came from seeing threats everywhere. Yes, the door code breach was sophisticated. Yes, the timing was convenient. Yes, it was possible that Sarah had been part of it. But nothing proved it. Nothing even suggested it beyond the fact that she'd benefited from being stuck in his apartment during a storm. And what had she gained? 4 days of shelter, some meals, a robot kit they'd built together. She'd refused his money multiple times, had maintained her dignity even when his mother attacked her, had given him more in 4 days than anyone had in 6 years, and asked for nothing in return except to be seen, to be trusted, to be valued for who she was instead of what she did or didn't have. And he'd repaid that by accusing her of being a con artist. Ethan dropped his head into his hands and let the full weight of what he'd done crash over him. He was his mother's son. Despite everything, despite swearing he'd be different, he'd looked at Sarah through the same classist lens. Poor woman in rich man's home, must be a scam, must be an angle, must be something wrong because people like her didn't genuinely connect with people like him without ulterior motives. Except she'd seen past his money to the lonely man underneath, had called him on his isolation and his fear and his carefully constructed prison, had made him want to be better, braver, more human. And he'd thrown it all away because being afraid was easier than being open. "Find the real scammer," Ethan said into the phone, calling Marcus back. "I don't care what it costs or how long it takes. Find whoever hacked that door code, whoever set up the fake rental site, whoever stole Sarah Miller's money. Find them, Marcus. And when you do, I want every penny recovered and returned to her, not as a gift from me, as restitution, as justice." "Mr. Caldwell, that could take weeks, months even. These operations are usually run from overseas. I have the best tech team in the country. Put them on it. Make it the priority. And Marcus, I want you to know that I'm sorry for putting you in this position. You were doing your job. But I'm learning that sometimes the biggest threats aren't the ones you can protect against with security systems. Sometimes they're the ones you create yourself by refusing to let anyone past your walls." After he disconnected, Ethan moved through his apartment like a ghost, seeing it through Sarah's eyes. The unused kitchen where she'd cooked with love. The living room where Noah had discovered technology with wonder. The guest room where they'd stayed, leaving behind only the faint scent of her shampoo and the absence that hurt more than any presence ever had. He was about to call it a night, to give up and admit defeat when he saw it, half hidden behind a sofa cushion, the edges bent from being repeatedly carried in small hands. A piece of paper, a child's drawing in bright crayon. Ethan picked it up with trembling fingers. 2 stick figures, one tall and one small, both wearing capes. Labels in Noah's careful 6-year-old handwriting, Super Ethan and Super Noah. They were holding hands, standing on top of a building labeled The Castle. At the bottom, in letters that had clearly taken great effort, Best Friends Forever. The dam broke. 6 years of holding everything in, of being strong and controlled and never letting anyone see him break. 6 years of telling himself that being alone was the same as being safe. 6 years of living in a fortress that was really a tomb. Ethan sank to the floor, with Noah's drawing clutched against his chest, and cried. For Sarah's hurt and Noah's confusion and his own spectacular ability to destroy the first good thing that had happened to him since Vanessa's betrayal. For the life he'd been living that wasn't really living at all. For the man he'd become who saw threats instead of hope, danger instead of love, suspicion instead of trust. His security measures hadn't protected him from danger. They'd protected him from life, from joy, from connection, from the messy, complicated, terrifying beauty of letting someone matter. And he'd been so grateful for that protection that he'd never realized it was slowly killing him. Sarah had seen it. In 4 days, a woman who cleaned offices and served coffee had seen what he'd spent 6 years hiding from himself. That his fortress was a prison. That his safety was a slow death. That real wealth wasn't in his bank accounts, but in the connections he'd severed in the name of security. And what had he done with that gift? with her honesty and her vulnerability and her willingness to risk her wounded heart on him. He'd thrown it back in her face, had looked at her through the lens of his trauma and seen a threat instead of salvation. But maybe, just maybe, it wasn't too late. Maybe he could fix this. Not with money or grand gestures or the kind of solutions that felt like control disguised as care, but with honesty, with vulnerability, with being willing to risk everything on the chance that Sarah Miller might forgive him for being exactly as broken as she'd feared. Ethan stood, Noah's drawing still in his hand, and felt something shift in his chest, something that felt like hope, like purpose, like the beginning of understanding that redemption wasn't about being perfect. It was about being brave enough to admit when you were wrong and humble enough to ask for the chance to do better. He had work to do, a scammer to find, money to recover and return, an apology to craft that went beyond words into action, a life to reconstruct from the ground up, starting with the understanding that real security didn't come from walls and surveillance systems. It came from being willing to let the right people in, even when it was terrifying, especially when it was terrifying. Ethan looked at the drawing one more time, at the simple faith of a 6-year-old boy who'd seen good in him and drawn them as heroes together. "I'll fix this, Noah," he whispered to the empty apartment. "I don't know how yet, but I'll fix it, I promise." Outside, snow began to fall again, gentle and forgiving. And for the first time in 6 years, Ethan Caldwell understood that sometimes the answer wasn't building higher walls. Sometimes it was tearing them down completely and praying that what you found on the other side was worth the risk of being exposed. He was about to find out. 2 weeks passed before Ethan walked through the door of Rita's diner. 2 weeks of his tech team working around the clock to trace the rental scam back through layers of encryption and overseas servers. 2 weeks of legal maneuvering to freeze accounts and recover stolen funds. 2 weeks of preparing himself for what he needed to do, knowing it might not be enough. The diner was exactly what he'd expected from Sarah's descriptions, worn but clean, modest but welcoming. The kind of place where regulars knew each other's names and coffee refills came without asking. Everything his world wasn't. It was the lunch rush, and Sarah was moving between tables with practiced efficiency, her smile professional but not quite reaching her eyes. She looked tired, thinner than she'd been 2 weeks ago. And when she laughed at something an elderly customer said, the sound was hollow. Ethan's chest tightened. He'd done that. He'd taken the light out of her and replaced it with exhaustion. He chose a seat at the counter and waited. Eventually, inevitably, she turned and saw him. Every emotion flickered across her face in rapid succession. Surprise, hurt, anger, something that might have been hope before she crushed it down. She approached with her order pad held like a shield. "What can I get you?" Her voice was professional, distant, like he was any other customer and not the man who'd kissed her like she was oxygen. "Sarah, coffee, pie? The lunch special is meatloaf, and it's actually decent today. I need to talk to you." "I'm working." She turned to move away, but his next words stopped her. "They arrested the scammer yesterday. My team traced the operation to a group in Eastern Europe running fake rental sites across 20 states. They've been doing it for 3 years, stealing from hundreds of people." Sarah's hand tightened on her order pad. "Good. I'm glad other people won't get hurt. Now, if you'll excuse me, your money, the full amount you saved for Noah's birthday, it was recovered through an international task force and returned through proper legal channels. Not from me, from the court system, as restitution." He slid an envelope across the counter. "The documentation is all there. Every penny you lost, plus interest, the judge ordered." She stared at the envelope like it might bite her. You did that. You tracked them down." "My team did. I just pointed them in the right direction and made it the priority." Ethan's voice was quiet. You deserve justice, Sarah, not charity, not my money, justice. And I'm sorry it took me this long to give it to you. Sarah picked up the envelope with trembling fingers, opened it, and he watched her eyes fill with tears as she saw the check, the legal documents, the proof that this wasn't a gift but rightfully returned property. I don't understand. Why would you do this? Because I was wrong. The words came out louder than he intended, and the diner was starting to go quiet, other customers turning to watch. But Ethan didn't care. He stood, and every eye in the place fixed on him. I was wrong to suspect you, wrong to let my fear override what I knew in my heart was true, wrong to look at you and see a threat instead of the most genuine person I'd met in 6 years. Ethan, you don't have to. Yes, I do. He moved around the counter, and Sarah's co-worker, a woman with kind eyes and protective body language, started to intercede. But Sarah held up a hand, stopping her. Sarah Miller, I need everyone here to know what I did. I need to say it out loud so I can't hide from it, can't pretend it didn't happen. He took a breath that felt like it might crack his ribs. 2 weeks ago, you and your son ended up in my apartment through no fault of your own. You could have demanded things, could have threatened to go to the press about the security breach, could have asked for money to keep quiet. Instead, you cooked meals. You brought life into my mausoleum. Your son taught me to laugh again, and you saw me, really saw me. Not the money or the company or the reputation, just me, the lonely, scared man living in a fortress because he was too broken to risk being hurt again. Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now, but she didn't move, didn't speak, just listened. And when my paranoia kicked in, when my security team raised concerns and my trauma made me suspicious, I didn't choose trust. I chose fear. I looked at you the way my mother looks at anyone without money, the way I swore I'd never look at anyone. And I hurt you. I hurt Noah. I destroyed the first real thing that had happened to me since my ex-fiancé taught me that vulnerability was dangerous. The elderly customer Sarah had been serving earlier spoke up. Young man, are you trying to win her back? I'm trying to apologize, Ethan said, his voice breaking. I'm trying to tell her that she was right about everything. My castle was a prison. My security was a cage. My money bought me everything except the only thing that matters, which is someone to share it with. Someone real and honest and strong enough to call me on my garbage while still seeing the person I could be if I was just brave enough to try. Rita emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on her apron. Sarah, honey, you want me to throw this man out? Sarah was crying openly now, mascara running, her professional mask completely shattered. I don't know what I want. You want the truth? Ethan asked. Here's the truth. These past 2 weeks, without you and Noah, have been the longest of my life. My apartment isn't a home anymore. It's just expensive square footage filled with furniture and silence. I can't cook without thinking about you humming in my kitchen. Can't look at that stupid robot without remembering Noah's joy. Can't sleep in my own bed without smelling your shampoo on the pillow and wondering if I destroyed the best thing that ever happened to me. You hurt me, Sarah whispered. You made me feel like Kevin. Like another man who looked at me and saw only what he wanted to see, not who I actually was. I know, and I don't have an excuse that makes that okay. I can only tell you that I'm sorry, that I'm in therapy now, working on the trauma and the trust issues and all the ways I've let fear run my life, that I understand if you can't forgive me. But I had to try. Had to stand in your world and risk public humiliation to tell you that you were right. About me, about my walls, about the fact that I was choosing slow death over the risk of really living. He reached into his pocket and pulled out Noah's drawing, worn now from being carried everywhere. Your son drew this, left it in my apartment, and when I found it, when I saw how he'd labeled us as best friends, as heroes together, I realized I didn't want to be the villain in this story anymore. I wanted to be the man Noah drew. The man you saw underneath all my defenses. The man I could be if I just stopped being so scared of being hurt that I hurt everyone first. Sarah took the drawing with shaking hands, looking at her son's careful crayon work. "He asks about you every day," she said softly. "Wants to know when we can see you again, when we can finish upgrading the robot, when we can visit the castle. And I don't know what to tell him, because I don't know if the man I fell for in 4 days was real or just another beautiful lie." "He was real." Ethan's voice was fierce now. "Sarah, that man is the real me, the one before Vanessa broke me, the one you helped me remember I could still be scared and imperfect and learning to trust again, but real. I promise you that was real." The diner was completely silent now, every customer invested in this drama, playing out over coffee and meatloaf. Rita broke the tension. "Sarah, take your break. This conversation needs privacy, not an audience." But Sarah shook her head. "No, he was public with his suspicion, public with his doubt. If he's trying to earn me back, it gets to be public too." She looked at Ethan with red-rimmed eyes. "You broke my heart. You made me believe in something impossible, and then reminded me why I stopped believing in fairy tales 5 years ago. I know. You met my son. You let him get attached to you. And then you looked at us like we were criminals. I know, and I hate myself for it." "Good." Sarah's voice hardened. "You should hate yourself for it, because Noah cried for 3 days after we left. Cried because he thought we did something wrong. Thought he shouldn't have touched your things or asked too many questions or been too loud. And I had to explain to my 6-year-old that sometimes adults make mistakes, that sometimes people we think care about us choose fear over love, that sometimes the castle isn't safe, it's just pretty on the outside and empty on the inside." Each word was a dagger, and Ethan took them all, deserved them all. "Tell me how to fix it. Tell me what I need to do to earn another chance. Not with you, necessarily. I don't deserve that yet. But with Noah, let me apologize to him. Let me explain that I was wrong and he was right, that he is exactly as special as he thinks he is, and any mistakes were mine, not his." Sarah studied him for a long moment. Then she looked at Rita, at the other customers, at the envelope with the returned money sitting on the counter. "One coffee," she said finally. "One conversation. And then I decide if you get anything more than that. Clear. Crystal clear." They sat in a booth in the back corner, coffee cooling between them. Years of damage and 2 weeks of misery, creating a chasm that seemed impossible to cross. But Ethan tried anyway. "I started seeing a therapist," he said. "Dr. Patricia Reynolds. Specializes in trauma and trust issues. We've been meeting every day since you left." "That's good." Sarah's voice was cautious. "That's really good, Ethan. But therapy doesn't erase what happened. No, it doesn't. But it's helping me understand why it happened. Why my response to stress is always suspicion. Why I build walls so high I suffocate behind them. Why I sabotage anything good before it can hurt me first." He wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "Dr. Reynolds thinks I've been living in survival mode since Vanessa. That I never processed the betrayal, just built defenses against it happening again, and those defenses are so thick that I can't distinguish between real threats and real connection." "I could have told you that," Sarah said, "and I'm not a therapist." "You did tell me that. On day 3, when you said my castle was a prison and I'd locked myself inside." His smile was sad. "I just wasn't ready to hear it. Wasn't ready to admit that being safe was killing me faster than any betrayal ever could." Sarah was quiet for a long moment, stirring her coffee without drinking it. "What do you want from me, Ethan? Really want?" "A chance," he said simply. "Not to jump back into where we were. Not to pretend the past 2 weeks didn't happen. But a chance to show you that I can be different. That I can choose trust over fear. That the man you met in that penthouse, the one who built robots with Noah and kissed you like you were precious, that's who I want to be, who I'm working every day to become. And what if it's not enough? What if I'm too scared now to try again? Then I'll accept that. The words cost him, but he meant them. I'll accept that I destroyed something irreplaceable because I wasn't strong enough to protect it. But Sarah, if there's any part of you that thinks maybe, possibly, we could try again, I'm asking you to be braver than I was, to give me the trust I didn't give you, to risk your heart on me one more time. Before Sarah could answer, her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her face changed. It's Noah's school. I have to... She was already sliding out of the booth, phone to her ear. Hello? Yes. This is his mother. What? Is he okay? I'll be right there. She disconnected, her face pale. He fell during recess. They think he might have broken his wrist. I have to go to the hospital. I need to... I'll drive you. Ethan was already standing. My car's outside. It'll be faster than waiting for a taxi. Ethan, you don't have to. Please. His voice was raw. Please, let me do this. Let me be there for you. For him. Not because it earns me points or gets me closer to forgiveness. Because you both matter to me, and Noah's hurt, and you shouldn't have to handle this alone. Sarah looked at him, and he saw the war happening behind her eyes. Pride versus practicality, fear versus need. Finally, she nodded. Okay, but this doesn't change anything between us. This is just transportation. I understand. The hospital waiting room was painted in shades meant to be soothing, but were really just depressing. Sarah sat with her knee bouncing, her hands twisted together, every muscle in her body taut with worry. Ethan sat beside her, close enough to offer support, but far enough to respect her space, and wished desperately that he had the right to hold her hand. When they finally allowed her back to see Noah, Ethan waited and waited, and was about to ask the nurse for an update when Sarah emerged, Noah beside her with his left wrist in a bright blue cast. Mommy said you brought us here. Noah's face lit up despite his obvious discomfort. Did you come back? Are we friends again? I missed you so much, Ethan. I've been telling everyone at school about the robot we built, and they didn't believe me. And I said it was true. And Noah, slow down, Sarah said, but her voice was gentle. Ethan came to help with the ride. He has to get back to work now. Actually, Ethan said, kneeling in front of Noah so they were eye level. I came because I needed to apologize to you. Man to man. Can we talk? Noah looked at his mother, who hesitated before nodding. 5 minutes. I'll be right over there. When Sarah was out of earshot, Ethan took a breath. Noah, I need to tell you something important. When you and your mom left my apartment, it was because I made a mistake. A big one. I got scared and said things that weren't true and hurt your mom's feelings. And I want you to know that none of it was your fault. You were perfect. The best visitor I've ever had. The best friend I could have asked for. Noah's lower lip trembled. Mum said we had to leave because grown-ups were disagreeing. But I thought maybe I broke something expensive or touched stuff I wasn't supposed to. No. Ethan's voice was fierce. No, buddy. You didn't do anything wrong. I did. I was the one who messed up. And I'm trying really hard to fix it, but I don't know if your mom is ready to forgive me yet, which is fair because I hurt her, and protecting your mom is the most important job in the world, right? Noah nodded solemnly. She takes care of me, so I have to take care of her too. Exactly. So I need you to know that if she decides she doesn't want to see me anymore, it's not because of you, it's because of me, because I wasn't brave enough when I needed to be. But you're the bravest person I know. You broke your wrist and you're not even crying. It hurts a lot, Noah admitted, but the doctor said I'm very strong and they gave me a sticker. You are strong. Ethan's throat was tight, and I'm sorry I let you down. If I could change what happened, I would, but I can't. I can only promise that I'm trying to be better, to be the kind of man who deserves to be friends with someone as awesome as you. Noah was quiet for a moment. Then he held out his right hand. "Want to sign my cast? The doctor said people who care about me can write nice things on it." Ethan's vision blurred. "I'd be honored." He signed carefully. "To Super Noah, from someone trying to be worthy of your friendship. Get well soon." Ethan. When Sarah returned and saw the signature, saw her son beaming up at Ethan with uncomplicated affection, something in her face softened. Just a fraction, but enough. "Thank you," she said quietly as they walked to the car. "For the ride, for talking to him, for trying." "Thank you for letting me." Ethan opened the car door for them. "Sarah, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but can I call you in a few days just to check how Noah's healing?" She looked at him over the car roof, and for the first time in 2 weeks, her expression wasn't closed off, wasn't angry, just considering. "One phone call," she said finally. "One, and we'll see where it goes from there." It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't even close, but it was possibility. And for Ethan Caldwell, who'd spent 2 weeks in his own personal hell, possibility felt like grace. 3 days later, Ethan was in his office reviewing quarterly reports when his assistant Jennifer buzzed through. "Mr. Caldwell, there's someone here to see you. She doesn't have an appointment, but she says it's urgent. A Vanessa Hartley." Every muscle in Ethan's body tensed. "Tell her I'm not available." "I tried. She says she'll wait. And sir, she's already talking to some of the other executives, creating a scene." Of course she was. Vanessa had always known how to weaponize social situations, how to make her presence felt in ways that forced response. Ethan closed his eyes, counted to 10, and made a decision. Send her in, but Jennifer, call security and have them stand by just outside the door. Vanessa swept into his office like she owned it, all glossy hair and designer clothes, and the kind of confidence that came from never having faced real consequences. "Ethan, you look well. I heard through the grapevine you've been making quite the spectacle of yourself. Public apologies in diners. Really?" "What do you want, Vanessa?" His voice was flat. "I want to help you, darling. I heard about your little waitress friend, how she took advantage of your good nature during that storm, how she's probably planning to take you for everything you're worth." She perched on the edge of his desk, her smile sharp. "It's a classic con, really. Manufacture a situation that makes you feel like the hero, play on your loneliness, get you emotionally invested, then threaten exposure or lawsuit unless you pay up. I've seen it a dozen times." "Is that how it worked with us?" Ethan stood, moving to the windows. "Did you manufacture our relationship, play on my loneliness, get me emotionally invested so you could sell my secrets? That was different. That was business. No, Vanessa, that was betrayal. And the fact that you don't see the difference tells me everything I need to know about why we're having this conversation." He turned to face her. "You're not here to help me. You're here because you heard I'm trying to move on, trying to build something real with someone, and you can't stand the idea that I might find happiness without you. Don't be ridiculous. What did you really take from me?" The question came out quiet but fierce. "Not the money, not the business secrets. Those I recovered. What you took was my ability to trust, my willingness to be vulnerable, my belief that someone could see past the money to the person underneath. You took that, Vanessa, and I let you. I let you steal 6 years of my life because I was too scared to risk being hurt again. So now you're risking it on some single mother who got scammed into your apartment." "Ethan, think about this logically." "I have thought about it every day for 3 weeks. And here's what I've realized. You didn't destroy me. I destroyed myself. You did a terrible thing, yes, but I chose to let that terrible thing define the rest of my life. I chose to build walls instead of bridges. I chose suspicion over trust. And I almost lost something real because I let what you did control who I became." He moved closer, his voice steady. "So thank you, Vanessa." Thank you for coming here today and reminding me why I'm fighting so hard to be different, why I'm willing to risk looking foolish or weak or naive. Because the alternative is becoming you, becoming someone so damaged and cynical that they see manipulation in every kindness, threat in every connection, and I'm done being that person. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make, and that's the point. For 6 years, I let your betrayal make my choices for me. Not anymore, so unless you have actual business to discuss, I need you to leave. Vanessa stood, her mask of concern slipping to show anger underneath. When this blows up in your face, when she takes you for everything you have, don't come crying to me. I won't, Ethan said simply, because even if Sarah never forgives me, even if this ends tomorrow, at least I'll know I tried. I risked. I chose hope over fear, and that's worth more than any amount of money you stole or could ever take from me. After she left, after the door closed and the sound of her heels faded down the hallway, Ethan sat at his desk and felt something release in his chest. He'd confronted his past, faced the demon that had been haunting him for 6 years, and survived, more than survived. He'd chosen differently, chosen Sarah over fear, chosen possibility over protection. His phone rang. Sarah's name appeared on the screen. Hello? His heart was racing. Noah wants to know if you'd like to come to dinner, Sarah said, her voice carefully neutral. Not a date, just dinner, so he can show you how well he's healing. And because he misses you, and maybe, she paused, maybe because I'm trying to be as brave as you were in that diner. I'd love to come to dinner, Ethan said, and his voice was rough with emotion. When? Friday, 6 o'clock. I'll text you the address. And Ethan, we're in Brooklyn, a walk-up. The apartment is small and the neighborhood is not where you're used to. Sarah, I don't care if you live in a cardboard box under a bridge. If you're there, it's exactly where I want to be. There was a long pause. Then, so quietly he almost missed it. I'm scared. Me too, he admitted. Terrified. But maybe that means it matters. Maybe that means it's worth fighting for. Maybe, Sarah agreed. We'll see. After they disconnected, Ethan looked at his calendar and cleared Friday evening, cleared the weekend too, just in case. Then he called Dr. Reynolds and scheduled an emergency session. Because if he was going to do this right, if he was going to deserve another chance with Sarah Miller and her incredible son, he needed to be healthy, whole, brave enough to risk his heart on something real. The fortress was coming down, and for the first time in 6 years, Ethan Caldwell was ready to live in the open, walls or no walls, consequences be damned. Friday dinner at Sarah's apartment became Saturday breakfast, then Sunday afternoon at the park with Noah, then Tuesday evening walks after Sarah's shift at the diner. Slowly, carefully, they rebuilt what fear had broken. Not the same as before. Something stronger. Something earned through honesty and risk and choosing each other every single day. 3 months passed, then 6, then 9. And somewhere along the way, Ethan's penthouse stopped feeling like his primary residence. Home became wherever Sarah and Noah were. Sometimes that was the apartment in Brooklyn where the radiator clanked and the neighbors were loud and every square foot was lived in and loved. Sometimes it was the penthouse, which Noah had slowly filled with drawings and science projects and the kind of beautiful chaos that came with a child who was encouraged to explore and create and be himself. Sarah had enrolled in online business courses, using the recovered scam money as seed funding for the future she'd always dreamed about. Not because Ethan pushed her or bought the classes or tried to control her path, because she was ready. Because having someone who believed in her made her believe in herself again. Ethan had stepped back from daily operations at his company, delegating to trusted executives and discovering that the world didn't end when he wasn't in the office 16 hours a day. He coached Noah's robotics team at school, attended Sarah's business presentations, learned to cook, badly but enthusiastically, because watching Sarah's face when he tried was worth every burnt meal and smoke alarm. His mother had come around, eventually, grudgingly, after realizing that her son was genuinely happy for the first time in years, and that Sarah Miller was not going to disappear or be intimidated or be anything except exactly who she was. They'd never be close, Victoria and Sarah, but they'd achieved a careful respect, built on the foundation of both loving the same stubborn, wounded, healing man. Now, as February approached again, as the anniversary of their accidental meeting drew near, Ethan found himself standing in a jewelry store, looking at rings that cost more than Sarah made in 5 years, and knowing that none of them were right. They were beautiful, flawless, expensive. Everything Sarah didn't care about. "I need something different," he told the jeweler, a patient man named Robert, who'd spent the last hour showing him increasingly elaborate options. "Something that means something, not just expensive, meaningful." "Tell me about her," Robert suggested. "Sometimes that helps." So Ethan talked about a woman who'd walked into his apartment by accident and changed everything on purpose. About a single mother who worked herself to exhaustion for her son and still had energy to make a stranger's museum feel like a home. About someone who'd been hurt and betrayed, but still chose to trust again, still chose to risk, still chose love over safety. "She deserves something unique," Ethan finished. "Something that says I see her, not what she doesn't have, not what she's overcome, just her, the person she is, the person I want to spend the rest of my life learning to be worthy of." Robert was quiet for a moment, then smiled. "I think I have something, but it's not traditional. And it's not the most expensive thing in the store." He brought out a ring that made Ethan's breath catch. The band was platinum, simple and elegant, but the setting was unusual. Instead of a single large stone, it held 3 smaller diamonds arranged in a way that reminded Ethan of something. 3 points, 3 people, a family. This was designed by a customer who wanted to represent herself, her husband, and their daughter, Robert explained. "The stones are different sizes, but they're set so they're all equally important to the structure. Remove one, and the whole thing falls apart. Together, they're unbreakable." Ethan picked it up and immediately knew this was it. Not the biggest or flashiest or most impressive, but the most true, because that's what they were. 3 people who'd found each other by accident and chosen to become a family on purpose. 3 diamonds, different sizes, equally essential. "I'll take it," he said, "and I need one more thing. Something for Noah, something that makes it clear he's part of this, that I'm not just asking to marry his mother, I'm asking to be his father. Officially, legally, forever." Robert nodded, understanding immediately. "I know just the thing." The plan came together with help from unexpected sources. Rita, who offered to close the diner early for a private event. Grace, Sarah's best friend, who helped coordinate schedules and kept secrets with the dedication of a CIA operative. Even Jennifer, Ethan's assistant, who'd become genuinely fond of Sarah over the past months and wanted to help create something special. But the most important conspirator was Noah himself. "You want to marry my mom?" Noah asked when Ethan sat him down 2 weeks before Valentine's Day. They were in the penthouse, working on the latest upgrade to the robot that had started everything. "I do," Ethan said seriously, "but I want you to know that I'm not just asking her, I'm asking you too, because this isn't just about me and your mom. It's about all 3 of us becoming a family, really, officially, legally a family." "Would I call you Dad?" Noah's voice was small, hopeful, scared all at once. "Only if you want to. You can call me Ethan. You can call me Dad. You can call me Hey You, for all I care. The label doesn't matter. What matters is that I love you, and I love your mum, and I want us to be together forever. All 3 of us." Noah was quiet for a long moment, his small fingers tracing the robot's circuits. "My real dad left," he finally said. "He didn't want me, didn't want us. Mom says it's because he was sick in his heart, not because I wasn't good enough. But sometimes I wonder if maybe I was too loud, or too much, or not smart enough." Ethan's heart shattered. "Noah, look at me." He waited until the boy's eyes met his. "Your father leaving had nothing to do with you. Nothing. You are smart and kind and creative and brave and so much more than enough. He left because he was broken in ways that had nothing to do with how incredible you are, and his loss is my gain because I get to be part of your life. I get to watch you grow up and build robots and ask impossible questions and become the amazing person I already see in you. You really want to be my dad. More than anything." Ethan pulled out the small velvet box he'd been carrying. "Which is why I got you this." Inside was a simple silver bracelet engraved with words Ethan had spent days perfecting. "Super Noah, beloved son, February 14th, 2026. Noah's eyes filled with tears. "The date is wrong. And that's not when I was born." "No," Ethan agreed. "It's the date I'm going to ask your mom to marry me. The date our family officially starts. The date you become not just Sarah's son, but mine too, if you'll have me." "Yes!" Noah threw himself at Ethan, the bracelet clutched in his small fist. "Yes, yes, yes. Can I help? Can I be part of asking her? Please." "Actually," Ethan said, hugging him tight and blinking back his own tears, "I was hoping you'd help me plan the whole thing. Because you know your mom better than anyone. You know what would make her happy. What would make her cry in a good way? What would show her that this isn't just about romance? It's about family. It's about home. It's about the three of us choosing each other forever." So they planned. Noah's ideas were sometimes ridiculous, often brilliant, always coming from a place of deep love for his mother. And as Ethan listened to this 6-year-old boy describe the perfect proposal, he realized something profound. Noah wasn't just helping plan a proposal, he was teaching Ethan what Sarah needed, what she valued, what would matter to her more than any grand gesture money could buy. "It should be here," Noah decided, "in the penthouse, where we first met. But it can't be fancy and cold like it used to be. It should be cozy, like home, like when Mom cooked dinner and we all sat together and it felt like a real family even though we'd just met." "You're absolutely right," Ethan said. "That's perfect." Valentine's Day arrived with clear skies and the kind of cold that made New York feel sharp and alive. Sarah had agreed to dinner at the penthouse, thinking it was just their usual evening together. Noah was in on the secret, practically vibrating with excitement that he was barely managing to contain. When they arrived, Sarah stopped in the doorway, her breath catching. The penthouse had been transformed, not with expensive decorations or hired designers, with memories, with them. The walls that had been bare now held framed photos. Sarah and Noah and Ethan at the park. At the museum, building robots, eating ice cream, laughing, living, every moment captured and displayed like the treasures they were. The kitchen island where Sarah had first unpacked her cereal boxes now held a spread of simple food, not catered, not fancy, just the meals she'd cooked for them over the past year, painstakingly recreated by Ethan with Noah's help, including, in the center, 2 boxes of store-brand cereal. "What is all this?" Sarah's voice was thick with emotion. "It's us," Ethan said simply. "It's every moment of the past year, every meal, every laugh, every time we chose each other. It's what happens when a fortress becomes a home." Noah tugged on Ethan's hand, his signal, time. "Sarah," Ethan said, moving to kneel in front of her while Noah stood beside him, both of them looking up at this woman who'd changed everything. "A year ago, you walked through that door by accident. You were supposed to be here for a weekend vacation. Instead, you got me, suspicious, broken, locked in a tower of my own making." "Ethan, let me finish." His voice was gentle. "Please, I've been practicing this for weeks, and if I stop now, I'll forget everything." He took a breath. "You could have been angry, could have sued, could have gone to the press about the security breach and made my life hell. Instead, you cooked dinner. You brought life to my mausoleum. Your son taught me to laugh again. And you saw me, really saw me. Not the money or the company or the reputation, just me. The lonely, scared man who'd been hiding so long he'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen." Tears were streaming down Sarah's face now. "You weren't the only one hiding. You weren't the only one scared. I know. Which is why what I'm about to ask is so terrifying and so perfect at the same time." He pulled out the ring box, and Noah pulled out his bracelet. "Sarah Miller, I'm not asking you to marry a billionaire. I'm not asking you to move into a penthouse or change your life or become someone you're not. I'm asking you to be exactly who you are, forever, with someone who loves every stubborn, strong, incredible part of you. And Mom," Noah added, his voice serious, "Ethan's asking me too, asking if he can be my real dad, not just the guy who builds robots with me, my actual dad, if that's okay with you." Sarah looked between them, these two people who'd become her whole world, and sobbed. "Noah, baby, is this really what you want?" "More than anything," Noah said solemnly. "He's already like my dad. This just makes it official, makes us official, a real family." Sarah dropped to her knees, pulling them both into a hug that felt like coming home. "Yes," she whispered into Ethan's shoulder. "Yes, yes, yes to all of it. The marriage, the family, the forever, all of it." "Yes." Ethan slid the ring onto her finger with trembling hands, and Noah put on his bracelet with a whoop of joy. And there, in the penthouse that had once been a prison and was now a home, they held each other and cried and laughed and began the next chapter of their impossible, accidental, perfect story. "I have one condition," Sarah said when they finally pulled apart enough to breathe. "We do this as equals. No prenup that treats me like I'm after your money. No separate accounts that say we're not really partners. No making me sign things that prove I'm trustworthy. Either you trust me or you don't. Either we're in this together or we're not." "No prenup," Ethan agreed immediately. "No separate accounts. No protections that say I don't believe in us. You're right. We're partners. Equals. In everything. For everything. Forever. Even though I'm a waitress who lives paycheck to paycheck. Even though I'm a billionaire who didn't know how to make coffee until you taught me." He cupped her face. "Sarah, you're the richest person I know. Rich in love, in strength, in grace, in everything that actually matters. Marry me. Not my money, not my company, not my penthouse. Me. The man you helped me remember I could still be. I already said yes, you idiot." But she was smiling through her tears. "Although I reserve the right to keep working, keep building my business, keep being me, not just your wife. I wouldn't have it any other way." They called Rita and Grace, who were waiting at the diner with champagne and a cake that said she said yes, in wobbly icing. They called Jennifer, who cried and said she'd known from the beginning. They even called Ethan's mother, who said congratulations, in a tone that suggested she was genuinely trying and maybe, someday, would actually mean it. But the best call was to Linda, Sarah's mother, who wept and said she'd been praying for this exact thing since the day Sarah had told her about the man in the towel who'd let them stay during the storm. "You found your home," Linda said. "Both of you found your home in each other. And that's all a mother can ask for her child. To be loved well, to be seen, to be chosen, every single day." Late that night, after Noah was asleep in what was now officially his room in the penthouse, Sarah and Ethan stood at the windows overlooking the city. Snow was falling gently, a year almost to the day since the storm that had trapped them together and changed everything. "Thank you," Sarah whispered, "for being brave enough to apologize, for doing the work." for showing me that not all wealthy men are Kevin, that not all risks end in heartbreak. Thank you for giving me a second chance, Ethan replied, for seeing past my damage to the person underneath, for teaching me that walls don't keep you safe, they keep you alone, and alone is the most dangerous thing you can be. We're not alone anymore. No, he agreed, pulling her closer. We're not. We're home. Finally, completely home. 5 years later, the penthouse looked nothing like the sterile showroom Ethan had bought. It looked like life, like chaos, like love made visible. Noah's drawings covered the refrigerator, now sophisticated designs for robots and computer programs that made Ethan's engineers jealous. Sarah's catering business had exploded, her small operation growing into something that employed 15 people and was booked months in advance for events across the city. And Ethan had stepped back even further from daily operations, focusing instead on mentorship programs and charitable work that actually changed lives instead of just writing checks. Dorothy Eleanor Caldwell, you put that down right now. Sarah's voice rang through the apartment with the practiced authority of a mother who'd spent the past year chasing a 1-year-old who'd inherited her father's curiosity and her mother's stubbornness in equal measure. The baby in question, named for Sarah's grandmother and Ethan's beloved neighbor who'd helped them in those early days, grinned and dropped the expensive tablet she'd been about to throw. She toddled toward her mother with arms outstretched, blonde curls bouncing, grey eyes sparkling with mischief. "You're lucky you're cute," Sarah said, scooping her up, "because you're also exhausting." "She gets that from you," Ethan said, emerging from his office where he'd been reviewing proposals for a new scholarship fund. "The exhausting part, I mean, not the cute part, that's all me. Your humility is overwhelming." But Sarah was grinning as she said it. Noah wandered in, now 11 years old, and somehow already showing signs of the teenager he'd become. "Dad, can you help me with this coding problem? I'm trying to get the robot to navigate using AI instead of pre-programmed routes, but the algorithm keeps getting stuck in loops." Ethan's heart still skipped when Noah called him Dad. Even after 4 years of legal adoption, even after Noah had insisted on taking the Caldwell name, even after hundreds of bedtime stories and homework help sessions and father-son talks, every single time it felt like a gift. "Show me what you've got," Ethan said, and they disappeared into Noah's room, leaving Sarah with Dorothy. Later, after the kids were in bed, after the chaos had settled into the comfortable quiet of an evening well spent, Sarah found Ethan standing at the windows again. Their spot, the place they always ended up when they needed to remember how far they'd come. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, sliding under his arm. "That rental scam," he admitted. "The one that was supposed to ruin your son's birthday and ended up giving us everything. I think about it sometimes. About how one person's crime became our miracle. How the worst day of your life led to the best day of mine. Do you ever wonder what would have happened if the code hadn't worked? If you'd been out that night? If the storm hadn't come?" "All the time. And then I stopped wondering because it doesn't matter. We found each other. Through chaos and mistakes and fear and broken walls. We found each other, and we chose each other, and we built this." He gestured to the apartment, to the evidence of life everywhere. "This messy, loud, perfect family. I never thought I'd end up here," Sarah confessed. "In a penthouse overlooking Manhattan, married to a billionaire, running a successful business. But you know what the strangest part is?" "What?" "I don't think about the money anymore. I don't think about the penthouse, or the expensive things, or the life I couldn't have imagined 5 years ago. I just think about you, about Noah, calling you Dad, about Dorothy learning to walk, about family dinners and homework help and the ordinary, extraordinary moments that make up a life. The money bought us freedom from stress, but it didn't buy us happiness. We built that ourselves." "We did," Ethan agreed. "With trust and risk and choosing each other every single day, even on the days when it was hard, especially on those days." They stood there for a long moment, watching snow fall over the city, and Sarah thought about that first night, about walking into a stranger's apartment with her sleeping son and thinking her life was over, about finding instead that it was just beginning, that sometimes the wrong door leads to exactly the right place, that sometimes getting lost is how you find home. "Thank you," Ethan whispered into her hair, "for walking through that door, for staying during the storm, for giving me a second chance when I didn't deserve it, for teaching me that real wealth isn't measured in dollars, but in love and laughter and the chaos of a 1-year-old who keeps trying to eat my phone." "Thank you for letting us stay," Sarah replied, "for being brave enough to apologize, for doing the work, for showing me that fairy tales can happen to waitresses from Brooklyn, that sometimes the guy in the towel really is a prince, that happily ever after isn't about castles or money. It's about finding someone who sees you and chooses you and builds a life with you that's better than any dream you could have imagined alone." Behind them, they heard Dorothy cry out in her sleep. Then Noah's footsteps as he went to comfort his sister, singing the lullaby Sarah had sung to him when he was small, a family, not by blood, except for Dorothy, but by choice, by commitment, by the daily decision to love each other through chaos and calm, through mistakes and triumphs, through ordinary days and extraordinary moments. "I love you," Ethan said. "I love this life. I love our family. I love that 5 years ago you made the best wrong turn in history." "I love you too," Sarah replied. "And you know what? I'm glad I got scammed. Grateful even, because that scam brought me here. To you, to this, to home." They stood there, watching the snow fall, wrapped in each other and the life they'd built together. And somewhere in that penthouse that had once been a prison and was now a home, a child's drawing still hung on the wall. Faded now, the edges worn from being touched and treasured, 2 stick figures in capes, holding hands, Super Ethan and Super Noah, best friends forever. And they were, all of them, best friends, family, home. Not because a rental code worked when it shouldn't have, not because a snowstorm trapped them together, but because they'd all been brave enough to risk their hearts on something impossible, brave enough to trust, brave enough to choose each other again and again, until choosing each other became as natural as breathing. The fairy tale didn't start with once upon a time. It started with a mistake, with a wrong door, a man in a towel, and a mother desperate to give her son something special. But it ended the way the best stories always do, with love, with family, with home, with happily ever after, earned one brave choice at a time. And as Sarah and Ethan stood there, watching the snow fall over their city, over their life, over their beautiful, messy, impossible family, they knew one perfect truth. Sometimes the best things in life come when you're not looking. Wrapped in chaos, hidden in a storm, waiting behind the wrong door. That's not luck, that's grace, that's destiny, that's home. I hope you enjoyed today's story. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss more stories like this. Leave a like and comment below what you thought of the story. See you in the next video.